Thank you so much, Frederick. I really appreciate it. The last speed mentoring session, we had somebody talk about vulnerability, and I think everybody truly enjoyed this. So I'm going to put my most present and vulnerable self out there for all of you. And there I am, being vulnerable. Okay, thank you. So, when I was asked if I would do a lecture or a talk with everybody that's here, I took a careful look at all of your videos and decided to familiarize myself with who you are. And I thought, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be just real brutally honest. I'm going to share a little story about something that happened to me very recently. I had decided to retire because I thought it was time to slow down. And I've been working literally for decades at what I considered, pretty high achievement in some face of some really unending obstacles, but I got over all of those and was successful. Basically, I was just tired. And I thought it was time to smell the roses that I keep hearing people talk about. And then all of a sudden I got a call out of the blue, and I mean out of the blue. I was asked to interview for an initiative that spoke to my very soul, and that is becoming the executive director of Diversity by Doing. So here it was, an even greater opportunity for me to impact the trajectory of lives of up and coming women and people of color and diverse populations. And no sooner did I say yes, and did I share my success with my colleagues and of course with my LinkedIn community, then that committee that lives in my head starts to pop up. And I start looking at all the people, they were acknowledging my new role, they were congratulating me. I mean, they were kind of flat out waxing poetic about all the contributions that could be made. And then it dawned on me, I've known almost all of these people for decades. And while they've always been supportive, they'd never been this enthusiastic. And that committee, in my mind, made me start to question if I belonged. What was I doing among a group of wildly successful entrepreneurs, thought leaders, doctors, and PhDs, and people that I just greatly admire? But having gone through this before, I used a little bit of my brain muscle memory and said, aha, I know what the culprit is. And that's what Arianna Huffington calls her roommate in this quote. And it's a topic that I want to talk about, and that is imposter syndrome. Can you imagine that Sonia Sotomayor, a sitting Supreme Court justice, could feel this way? And there it is. Even the First Lady has something that pops up beneath this facade of success. So even the people we consider uber successful experience self-doubt. And as my last example, and really fitting for this group, can you imagine Dr. Margaret Chan expressed her imposter syndrome in this statement that's on the screen? She finished 2 terms as head of the World Health Organization. And you would think that her educational background and all that experience that she had would make her feel like an expert in the field, and she is. However, if you look at this photo, it's fairly simple to reason why we wrestle with imposter syndrome. Systemic conditioning has really normalized the idea that it's natural for women to suffer from imposter syndrome in the workplace and even feelings of being in the right place. And why? Take another look at that picture. Tell me how it's possible that a large group of men that look primarily white can advocate for or make informed decisions about national health care without one single woman in the room. It's a fact. We're more likely to experience imposter syndrome if we don't see somebody or have examples of people who look like us or share our background who are clearly succeeding in our field. And this is especially true for women, Black, Indigenous people of color, because overall, our representation is lacking. And I was fortunate because even though I do revisit this feeling of non-belonging frequently through my life and my career, I was fortunate that my very first mentor, she was more than a mentor, she was my sponsor. Now, mentors have great benefits, and I believe in mentorship. Sponsors often have more impact. a sponsor helps you advance, while a mentor gives you ideas about how you can advance. And my first mentor sponsor was a regional bigwig at Hewlett Packard. And I was 18 years old. She was the only she in that suite of executives, and it was her that supported me, and she guided me and insisted that I belonged in spite of what was around me. So if knowing and understanding is half the battle, then coping and succeeding is the balance. And that's what I want to talk about next. I really wanted to sort of frame for everybody what a lot of people feel and what a lot of people go through, but I also want to talk about how you work your way through that. I want to talk about 9 ways to cope with imposter syndrome. So first of all, know the signs. And, we overlook these signs all the time that come up on our day-to-day lives. And so I'm going to ask you a couple questions and just raise your hand if you've ever felt like this. You felt like you got lucky when you actually prepared and you worked hard. You find it hard to accept praise. Okay, you find it, or you hold yourself to incredibly and sometimes impossibly high standards. You find the fear of failure paralyzing, like me doing this presentation today. You avoid expressing confidence because you think people will see it as overcompensating or being obnoxious. You're convinced you're not enough. Well, thank you for those who are bold enough and brave enough to raise those hands, because you probably noticed from those responses, when you have imposter syndrome, some of the most important encouragement comes from understanding that hugely successful people, both male and female, have built amazing careers, even while regularly coping with it. And so you're not alone. It's also really important to distinguish humility and fear. Actually, Annette made a comment the other day when I told her what I was going to present about, and she made a very poignant remark. There's taking humility in hard work and accomplishments, and then there's feeling overcome with fear because of them. So sometimes simply being good at something can cause us to discount its value. You think about what you're good at, and do you ever think, everybody can do that? But it is possible to feel worthy without feeling entitled. And overcoming imposter syndrome is all about finding a healthy balance between the two of them. So humility and worthiness have nothing at all to do with defending your territory. You don't have to feel like a fraud to be gracious and open and humble. Strongly encouraged. This is really a good one. Many people who suffer from imposter syndrome are high achievers. And people who set extremely high standards for themselves are always committed to doing their best and being the best. But perfectionism just feeds into the imposter syndrome. When you feel like you're a fraud, it's usually because you're comparing yourself to some perfect outcome that's either impossible or improbable. No one can do everything perfectly. But holding yourself up to that kind of standard can be super counterproductive. At some point, you got to step back and say, okay, when is good enough good enough? Striving for perfection is really noble, but it's not usually realistic. Be kind to yourself. But imposter syndrome manifests itself as a voice in the head, the committee that I was talking about earlier, and it kind of berates you with these negative messages like you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, you can't do this. Well, negative self-talk is a bad habit. Everybody knows that. But it really influences your stress and anxiety levels. So being kind to yourself simply means changing the way you talk to yourself in your head by practicing positive self-talk. It helps you become less stressful, it helps you become less anxious, and it helps you build up the courage to do the things that'll bring you greater rewards. I have a good friend, her name is Maria Claw. She is the president of Harvey Med College. And she suffered from imposteritis, is what she calls it, for almost her entire career. So she told me that she wakes up most days with a voice on the left side of her head telling her that she's an incredible failure. This is the president of Harvey Mudd College. On the right side, she says she can change the world. And so she opts to listen to the right side, that she can change the world. And those kind of affirmations, you know, psychologists have found that they bridge into your subconscious mind. So the more you say it, the more you believe in that right side of your head conversation, I think the better off you are. I think when you feel like an imposter, one of the hardest things to grasp is how much of a role of you have in your own success. You might sometimes think, oh, it was others' luck or others' hard work, when in fact it's your own work. It's your knowledge, it's your preparation. It has a lot to do with it. So to show yourself that you're actually doing well, keep track of your wins, that great idea you had, or how you acknowledge struggling with imposter syndrome in a particular instance and you overcame it. That's a win. Talk about it with your mentor or your manager. Nobody needs to suffer in silence, particularly nowadays. We've all been through enough. So share your experiences with somebody that's better equipped, that has been through this before. They'll be able to talk with you candidly about their struggles if they've had them, give you an objective view. Maybe they work at a different company or in a different department. Ask them if they've ever felt that way, or if they know somebody who has. The best mentors will tell you about their struggles, what they've gone through, the mistakes they made in their careers. And you'll probably find some really great advice and some helpful stories along the way. And even though you might feel unsure about yourself and what you can do, you should always say yes to opportunities. It's impossible to say yes to everything. I had to find that myself over a period of time, especially when you're feeling stressed or you're spread too thin. But it's really common for people who have imposter syndrome to turn down career-making opportunities because they feel like they won't do a good job. When you're presented with a new opportunity, it's important to distinguish between the voice in your head saying you can't do it because you're not worthy, and the one saying because you have too much on your plate. The former is the imposter syndrome one. And it's really hard to get rid of it completely. I mean, like I said, I started this with saying, this is how I felt after I said yes to diversity by doing, especially if you've had it for years and years, if you've gone through this a lot. We now know what that feeling is called, and we know that other people suffer from it. We know a little bit about why we feel this way, but now I think we have a better idea about how to handle it. So whenever you're feeling that way, I recommend you invite it in and remind yourself why it's there and what it means. So wrestling with my demons and being invited to work with some amazing colleagues, I decided that rather than trying to fit in, it was time for me to realize and embrace what I know. That's why they asked me to the table in the first place. I don't need to be anybody else. I just need to be me. And with that, I'm going to leave you with this thought. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to meet you and to share with you this opening session and some of my authentic truth. I expect you're going to ask about imposter syndrome while you're in your one-on-one mentoring sessions. I encourage you, just go for it. Thank you.